Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Hmm.
Today we're getting into a really fascinating story, one that's largely forgotten but quite significant.
Mm-hmm.
The rise and fall of Fisher's Big Wheel.
Mm.
You might remember them, maybe not. But this was a discount department store chain. Started small, Newcastle, Pennsylvania,
Right.
but grew to over 100 stores across the Northeast and Midwest. It's a classic story. Really ambition, competition, big shifts in retail.
Yeah.
And it all ended with bankruptcy, closure in 1994.
Yeah.
So our mission today is to kind of unpack that history, look at the wins, the challenges, figure out what happened to this, well, this retail icon.
And it's such a compelling story because it really tells us so much about business, about competition, especially how things change. It's not just looking back. It's about connecting the dots for today, I think, seeing how even success stories can get disrupted.
Absolutely. So let's go back. 1939, Newcastle, Pennsylvania. Where did Fisher's Big Wheel actually come from? How did it begin?
Well, interestingly, it wasn't started completely from scratch. It was actually a merger. Yeah, two local businesses joined up, Fisher Dry Goods and a hardware store that was already called Big Wheel.
Ah, okay. So the name was already there.
Part of it, yeah. And this merger created this discount retail model right from the start. They offered a huge range of stuff, appliances, clothes, hardware, sporting goods, you name it. And the key was it was all at budget prices.
Smart move. But, okay, other big chains were starting to pop up then, too. How did Fisher's find its own space, its niche?
That's really central to their early success. While the big guys, maybe Kmart, later Walmart, were looking at bigger cities, Fisher's deliberately went for smaller towns.
The underserved markets.
Exactly. Places the giants often just flew over. And these stores, sometimes they use the name Buy Smart. They became, real community centers in Ohio, Michigan, New York, places like that. They knew their customer, knew their town.
Built loyalty that way.
Definitely. They were the main discount option for many people.
So they had this solid base. How do they scale it up? Any big moves that really accelerated their growth?
Oh, yeah. A really significant one was in 1978. They bought up a bunch of stores from Gamble Skogmo's Tempo and Buckeye Mart chains.
Right, I remember Tempo.
Yeah, and they rebranded them as Fisher's Buckeye Tempo. That acquisition really expanded their map overnight, gave them much more presence.
So what did that look like by the 80s? How big had they actually become?
Well, by the 1980s, that strategy had really worked out. They were doing well. Nearly 70 stores spread across 8 states.
Wow, 8 states.
Yeah, and that original store in Newcastle, it sort of served as the model, the blueprint for the product mix and that focus on low prices. It showed the formula worked and could be replicated.
Okay, so that takes us into their peak years. What did Fisher's Big Wheel look like when it was really firing on all cylinders?
Right. At its absolute height, which was the late 1980s, they had over 100 stores, Northeast, Midwest.
Over 100.
Yeah. And the strategy, it sounds simple, but it was effective then, to bring cheap goods to places that didn't have many options. But, importantly, they weren't just in small towns anymore. They were also competing directly with chains like Zayre, Kmart, Hills, and some of the bigger towns, too.
So they felt confident enough to go head-to-head.
They did, and they kept growing. In '89, they picked up 8 Danner's stores and a couple of Hex locations in the Midwest.
Still expanding. What about inside the stores? What made them a destination?
Well, the inventory was just incredibly broad. It really was a one-stop shop. Clothing, electronics, furniture. Some places even had a Fisher's food basket, like in Ridgeville, Ohio. Think about that convenience for a small town back then.
Yeah, that's huge. Saves people a lot of driving.
Absolutely.
So from the outside, it looks like this unstoppable machine.
Yeah.
But you mentioned something. Were there signs even then that maybe things weren't quite as stable as they looked?
That's a really astute point. There was a subtle clue, maybe. In 1986, Peter H. Hollis, who was the company president, he left. He went over to Ames Department Stores, another competitor. Now, maybe it was just a career move. But when a top leader jumps ship, especially to a rival, right when the company seems to be at its peak, sometimes, it hints at disagreements internally, maybe about strategy, maybe seeing challenges coming that others weren't acknowledging yet.
Interesting. A little crack of the facade, perhaps?
Perhaps. It suggests maybe not everything was perfectly smooth sailing behind the scenes.
So, okay, the late 80s are the peak. What happens next? What starts the downward spiral in the early 90s? What hit them so hard?
The early 90s, that's when the whole retail game changed drastically. You had Walmart and Target really flexing their muscles.
The giants wake up.
Exactly. And they weren't just competing on price, they were building bigger stores, much more efficient operations, huge economies of scale. And for smaller regional players like Fisher's, it just became incredibly hard to keep up.
Their model couldn't compete with that scale.
Right. It's fascinating because, like you said earlier, their initial strategy was brilliant, finding that uncontested space. But the problem is, those spaces don't stay uncontested forever.
The bigger fish arrive.
The bigger fish arrive.
Right.
And Fisher's strategy, which had been their strength, suddenly wasn't enough against this new hyper-efficient model. They needed to adapt fast.
Did they try? Were there attempts to, fight back or change course?
Oh, they definitely tried. In 1991, a company called Heartland Stores bought Fisher's Big Wheel.
Okay.
And they had plans, big plans for revitalization, even talked about a new flagship store in Pittsburgh. But, well, it just didn't really take off. The plans kind of fizzled out.
So the rescue attempt didn't quite work. Was the pressure just too much? Was it that direct competition you mentioned?
It really was direct. Walmart especially wasn't just expanding generally. They were aggressively moving into those exact small towns that had been Fisher's bread and butter.
Targeting their core.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They came in with lower prices, massive selection. Fisher's just couldn't compete on those terms anymore in its home turf.
And what about internal factors? Was it all just external pressure, or were there issues inside the company too?
Unfortunately, yeah, there were internal problems as well. Reports suggest some mismanagement issues, and simply the cost of running that large, spread-out network of stores, it was expensive.
Their footprint became a burden.
In a way, yes. What worked in the 70s and 80s became a liability in the efficiency-driven 90s. So by 1993, they had to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy.
Trying to reorganize.
Right. They closed 10 stores, tried to streamline, tried to survive, but it just wasn't enough. The competition was relentless, the debts were piling up.
And that led to the end.
That was the final act, really. In 1994, they started liquidating everything, all the remaining 55 stores. The whole system just collapsed.
So just like that, by the end of '94, Fisher's Big Wheel was gone.
Completely gone. Vanished from the retail map.
And the stores themselves? What happened to all those buildings?
It's the typical story, really. Heartland Stores sold a lot of them off to Pamita.
Yeah, another discount chain.
Right, based in Nebraska. Others just sat empty for a while or eventually got taken over by other retailers, maybe a Mark's or a Big Lots, depending on the location.
And the headquarters in Newcastle.
Became medical offices eventually. And that flagship store, the one that started it all, just a memory.
Wow. It's quite a story.
It really is. And what's striking is, for so many people in those smaller towns, Fisher's wasn't just a store. It was the store.
A community hub you mentioned.
Yeah, a place to shop, bump into neighbors, find deals. It left a real mark, even if it's largely forgotten now on a national level.
So what's the big takeaway then?
I think it shows how a strength can become a weakness. Their model of serving small communities with a wide mix was perfect. Until it wasn't. Until a bigger, leaner, more scaled model came along. It wasn't just about tweaking things. They needed a fundamental reinvention, and that's incredibly hard to pull off when you're already under siege. Adaptability is key, but sometimes the required adaptation is just too radical, too fast.
So quite a journey we've traced from those unique origins, that powerful peak period, and then, well, the unavoidable decline and fall. It's a stark reminder, isn't it, of how fast things can change in retail.
Absolutely. And looking at this story, the materials you gathered really highlight that transformation. It sort of leaves you thinking, doesn't it? What other stores, maybe from your own past, these sort of forgotten giants, have disappeared? And what lessons might their stories hold, especially now as things like online shopping keep changing the game again?
That's a great question. Something definitely worth pondering. It really underscores that dynamic nature of the business. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Fisher's Big Wheel.
Glad to be here.
We hope you found it insightful, and we invite you to continue exploring these kinds of complex stories with us on future deep dives.